Hello there. How is everybody? I hope you're all well. I'm great, thank you very much. Big hugs to all of you, and I hope you've had a fabulous day and are ready to settle down to a fabulous story. And we're on the second part of our story tonight, where we're learning about a very unfortunate incident where, a lovely lady called Patsy was supposed to get married to her fiancé, and her fiancé Andy just abandoned her at the altar. So I can't imagine how humiliating and heartbreaking that must have been for her. And she probably doesn't have any knowledge of knowing why he did that. But I'm sure we're going to find answers in this story. So before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's continue with part 2 of our story tonight. But Mum, Andy loved me. We were good together. But then he does this to me. I just don't understand any of this. None of this makes sense. Andy wasn't showing any doubts about us spending the rest of our lives together. He was the one that insisted we got married. And then this happens. My mother put her arm lovingly around me and gave me a tight squeeze. Look at you, sweetheart. You look as if you've been dragged through a hedge backwards. Your mascara is running all over your cheeks and is under your eyes, making you look like a raccoon. You need to have a long soak in the bath. Get out of this wedding dress of yours, and as far as I'm concerned, you're welcome to tear it up. I don't care about that at all. Put on some comfortable PJs. Seb says he wants to stay with you to keep you company. I'm afraid I'd love to stay, but I have to go back to the reception to entertain the guests. But why did he do this to me, Mum? I whimpered. I just don't get it. I don't understand. You know what, Patsy? That's a very good question you ask, said my mother. The older I get, the more confused I become about people. This incongruous behaviour coming from Andy makes no sense. I really do wish I had all the answers, but I don't. Some mysteries never get solved, and I guess this is going to be one of them. I thought Andy Glover was smitten about you, and I believe he was. But it's poignantly clear to me that he wasn't committed enough to go through with this wedding. He must have had an attack of cold feet, which was why he just bolted. If I can offer you a smidgen of comfort, dear, you're not the first woman that has been abandoned at the altar like this, and no doubt you won't be the last. It's happened to a lot of women over the centuries. I think there are some well-meaning people out there eager to make a commitment of marriage. But then when it comes to finally taking the plunge, they simply can't do it. I remember telling your father once, after your Aunt Hilda had gone bungee jumping, that I wanted to do the same. And I was determined that I'd be able to go through with it. But when push came to shove, I got cold feet. I just couldn't jump. Your father kept telling me to close my eyes and just go for it. But I couldn't do it. I guess that's what happened to Andy Glover today. He thought he wanted to get married. He believed it. He loved you. But when he finally got to the altar, he couldn't take that leap of faith. Maybe he was terrified of making a long-term commitment. Who knows? There are many people out there that are commitment-phobic. I think it's pitiful what he did to Patsy, said Seb, shaking his head grimly. This was such a big day for her, and it's all she talked about for weeks on end at the flower shop. She's been so excited about her wedding day, like every other young lady would be. And then this has to happen. There is no excuse for Andy Glover to behave like this. I just don't get it. My mother had left Seb with me and gone off to join my father to entertain the wedding guests at the venue. My father turned the wedding event into a party, as he didn't want people to leave the wedding with empty stomachs, and for all the good food at the venue to go to waste. But Seb had loyally remained doggedly at my side, while my parents had entertained the wedding guests. Seb organised a hot bath for me, scented with jasmine, which increases your confidence and gives you courage, and boy did I need that. After my long rejuvenating soak in the bath, Seb helped me to cut up my wedding dress into tiny pieces, and it was oddly cathartic doing that. We ended up laughing about it, and I felt so good tearing that dress up. To new beginnings, said Seb to me, as we clicked our glasses together. Seb ordered margarita pizzas for us from the local Italian pizzerias. He poured champagne into fluted glasses for us, to ease away the horror of what had happened. And the question that was literally hanging on both of our lips was why? Why had Andy done this to me? It made no sense to us at all. Of course, I'd left Andy a ton of messages on his cell, and the only reply I had received was, "I'm sorry, Patsy. I didn't mean to hurt you like this, but I couldn't go through with getting married." When I'd asked him to explain himself on the cell phone, I never heard a dicky bird from him again. I knew he'd ditched his cell, when on one of my calls I got a reply in a female voice saying, "Sorry, the number you have reached no longer exists." Andy and I had met in serendipitous circumstances, if you can call it that, which made me unequivocally believe that God himself had brought us together. I'm afraid to say that I rear-ended Andy's car by mistake one day. My mother had called me on my cell phone while I was driving on the road. She was assuming that I was still in the flower shop working with Seb, so she thought that Seb was around for moral support, which I would have needed at the time. I had left work extra early, as Seb said I deserved to have some time off, as we'd been working very hard with flowers recently. "I've got something quite dreadful to tell you, love," my mother said on the phone. "I need you to get to the hospital at once. Is Seb there with you by any chance?" "Yes, he is," I lied, as I wanted my mother to get to the point. "What's happened, Mum?" "I'm afraid to tell you your grandfather's had a stroke. It's not looking good at the moment." "I'll be there," I told my mother. My heart was now in my throat, as I wondered if it was the beginning of the end for my grandfather. In my emotional state, my driving was erratic that day, as I impatiently wanted to get to the hospital and rarely put my foot on the pedal. That was when my car had smashed into the back of Andy's, and before I knew it, I had pulled over to the side of the road. Andy climbed out of his car, looking less than amused. "I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to bang into you like that." "What the hell is wrong with you, lady?" he snapped at me furiously. In that moment, I don't know what overcame me, but the tears just spilled down my cheeks, and suddenly Andy looked rather uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," Andy said. "I didn't mean to upset you in the way I did. I probably came off rather obtruse. It's just annoying having my car rammed into like this, but I can see you didn't mean it." "I'll pay for all the damages. I'll give you my insurance details," I said, handing them to him. "I'm so very sorry," he said. "To have upset you, I mean." We said our goodbyes, and I thought I'd never see Andy again. I didn't give him a passing thought after that. Thankfully, I'm glad to say my grandfather made a full recovery from his stroke, and I forgot about the incident with Andy, as the insurance naturally covered the damages to his car. One day Andy walked into the flower shop in order to order some flowers for his mother's birthday. When I asked him if I could help him, he recognized me at once. "I know who you are. You're the girl that rammed into the back of my vehicle," he said. "I never forget a pretty face like yours. I'm sorry, I came down on you rather hard and succeeded in really upsetting you. I was very abrupt. I must apologize. I'm not normally like that. It was one of those off days for me, I'm afraid to say." I told Andy that I'd not been driving terribly well that day, as I was in a tearing hurry to get to the hospital. "That's why I was grievously upset," I shared with him. "My grandfather just had a stroke, but luckily he made a full recovery." "Good Lord, you should have told me all this. I would have gladly driven you to the hospital myself. No wonder you were in such a dreadful state. Look, I'd really like to make it up to you if I may. Would you like to come out to dinner with me?" "Look, it's very kind of you to ask, but it's not necessary. You owe me nothing." "Look, I'd really like to take you out on a date. I'm not really asking you to dinner to make it up for my rudeness, if you know what I mean. I'm asking you out because I genuinely like you. Go on, please don't be coy. Is there any food type you particularly like?" "Well, Italian is my favourite," I admitted. "Well, Italian it is. I just happen to know of a very good place," said Andy, taking down my details and assuring me he'd pick me up later that evening. It was after that first date our relationship had become a whirlwind-like romance. I told my parents all about Andy Glover, and they were very eager to meet him. So my mother arranged a special dinner for him. "I think he's the one," I told my mother excitedly. "I really, really like him, Mum." "Oh, darling, this is thrilling news," said my mother, wrapping me in a warm, effusive hug. "Oh, I'm so happy for you. Oh, I can't wait to meet this mystery man. He's got to come around to the house for dinner. I mean, he could potentially be my son-in-law." "Mum, don't say that," I giggled. "Why not?" asked my mother. "You said yourself you were sure he was the one." "And I am saying that, Mum, but I don't want to jinx things between us." When my mother invites people over to dinner, nothing is ever modest. She'll go to town to make the affair a banquet. It's not because she's showing off, of course, but she genuinely wants her guests to feel warmly welcome and to enjoy the meal she cooks for them. When Andy arrived at my parents' house, he was ushered into dinner, and was quite taken aback at how resplendent everything looked at the table. My mother had dressed up that night to the nines, and looked ever so dashing, but my father just wore a casual pair of chinos and a crisp white shirt that was open at the collar. My father was unusually quiet that evening, looking at Andy politely, but I observed there was no warmth in his eyes. "So tell me all about yourself, Andy," my mother had asked him effusively. "My daughter has told me so much about you, but I'd like to hear it from the horse's mouth myself." At the time, Andy was a manager for a department store in Portland, and over dinner that night he talked and talked about himself. How one day, when he had the money, he was going to buy for himself a magnificent house overlooking the Oregon coast, which would have its own personal workshop, where he'd run his restoration business, fixing up relics from the past, bringing them back to the mint condition they had been in before the weathering of age had made these things lose their gloss and sparkle. "Goodness gracious me, Andy, you are very impressive, I have to say. Me personally, I love antiques. And for you to be able to bring things from the past and turn them into apple pie condition is nothing short as admirable as far as I'm concerned. You are quite ambitious, I can see. What makes you want to restore old things, Andy, if you don't mind my asking?" "Well, I don't really know. I like antiques, and I like working with my hands. Over the years, I've managed to fix things that are in a very bad state of repair, and make them as good as new. There's quite a high demand, you know, for people who can do stuff like that. But the problem is I need a whole lot of money to start up my own business, and I'm a little skint, I'm afraid, in that regard. I don't earn a great deal of money as a department manager. I do remember I fixed up a carousel once from the 60s, and I found that thing at a garage sale, would you believe it? And I sold it for a handsome sum of money. So if you can find old pieces like that and bring them back to life, you can make a whole lot of money, you know, which is what I intend to do in the future." "Well, I'm sure you can. There must be a demand for these things," my mother had said. "But you're right. I suppose with any business you're going to need capital. Perhaps you should get people to invest in you, and then maybe you can go down your merry way and abandon, you know, your life as a department store manager." "I hope so," Andy had said. When Andy had left that night, I asked my mother what she thought of him. "Oh, what a lovely, inspirational man he is," she said, turning around to look directly at my father, to ask him what he thought about my new boyfriend. My father simply nodded his head and walked away. I'd never seen him behave like that. "Oh, don't mind your father," said my mother. "He is the absolute end, isn't he? So typical of him to be like that. A man of few words he is, but I'm quite sure your father really liked Andy as much as I did." It was perfectly true, of course. My father had never been a big talker, but I knew if he liked someone enough, there would be an approving twinkle in his eyes. But on this occasion over the dinner table that night, I hadn't seen it. I had a horrible feeling in my gut that my father had not warmed to Andy, and I couldn't understand why. I really, really wanted my dad to like my boyfriend. My parents' opinion really did matter to me. The following day when I met up with Andy, the first thing he said to me is, "I don't think your father likes me, Patsy." He was giving me funny, disapproving looks over the dinner table, as if he was saying, "What the hell are you doing with my daughter?" "I'm sure you're mistaken about that, Andy," I had said, trying to reassure him. But deep down in my heart, I knew my father obviously did not like him. On the day that Andy proposed to me, at the very same Italian restaurant where we enjoyed our first date together, I remember the restaurant had erupted in applause when Andy got down on his knees in front of everyone. So his bold actions certainly had demanded an audience, and I think he quite liked that. I was personally rather embarrassed about the whole affair. I didn't like the attention being focused on me. But the restaurant generously plied us with free champagne and dessert on the house, so the fuss ended up being rather nice, as everybody wished us well. When we arrived at my parents' house to reveal the good news to them, and to tell them we were getting married, my father's face paled, all the colour left his skin, and then he asked Andy if he might have a private word with him in his office. I asked Andy when we were alone together what my father had said to him, and he said my dad had told him to take good care of me, and not to hurt his little girl, or he'd come after him with a carving knife. "He never said that," I said, looking visibly shaken, as my father was not a threatening person by any manner of means. "You're kidding, right?" "No, I'm not. I wish I was," said Andy. "The worst thing of it all is I think he meant it. You should have seen the contemptuous way he looked at me, Patsy. I've done nothing to deserve his obvious disdain towards me. I think he thinks you're out of my league, and that you could do so much better and end up married to somebody far more superior than a department store manager. Doesn't your father realise that I'm going places? One of these days I'll have my own workshop, and we'll live in a magnificent house overlooking the Oregon coast." "You've misjudged my father, Andy. My dad is not that kind of person that would judge you on your job, or on how much money you make. He's never been like that." "Well, I hate to burst your bubble, Patsy, but maybe you don't know your father as well as you think you do. He's not pleased we're getting married, I know that for sure. He'd prefer it if you married someone who's loaded like a doctor or a lawyer. He does not like me." "Well, if he doesn't like you," I assured Andy, "it's not because of your job. Maybe he's just been overprotective towards me. I am his only daughter, after all. I'm sure a lot of fathers are like that, you know, and no one is ever good enough for their children. But I can promise you this, Andy. If my father doesn't like you, he hasn't expressed any misgivings to me at all about you. Give him time. My father's rigidly set in his ways, you know. He doesn't do change well. My getting married and leaving home for good, it can't be easy for him." "I suppose you're right on that," Andy agreed. "Now that you put it like that, it makes some kind of sense." When I had told Seb at the flower shop the next day my great news, and that Andy had proposed to me at the Italian restaurant, where we'd enjoyed our first date together, he had tried to look happy for me, but I could sense that his happiness was not genuine. At this point in time I knew Seb like the back of my hand, so it was extremely difficult for him to hide his true feelings from me. I realised that, much like my father, he didn't like Andy at all, and I couldn't understand why. What had Andy done to both men to bring on such strong, intense feelings of disdain and dislike, which made it obvious to me that both men that I cared about the most in my life did not like the man I was about to marry? This should have sounded an alarm bell for me, as both Seb and my dad are great judges of character, but Andy had swept me off my feet, and I was head over heels in love with him. So I hastened to say, even if my father had expressed his extreme dislike towards Andy, I'm not sure it would have changed my mind about him. I told myself that Seb and my father didn't know Andy very well, and were both being very protective towards me, and failed to see what a good man he really was. "You're getting married? I don't believe it," said Seb. He threw his arms around me effusively. "If you're happy, I'm happy," he said. "This calls for a celebration, does it not? I must get some of the finest French champagne for us to drink, along with some canopies,
and we can have our own little wild party in here."
"I don't need a fuss, Seb," I told him.
"Oh, but you do, my darling. You don't get married every day, after all."
"You do like Andy, don't you, Seb?" I asked him gingerly.
"No, of course I don't like Andy," Seb had teased, giving me a naughty wink. "He's absolutely not my type. But I can see he's good for you. Well, he makes you happy. And after all, that's all that matters. If he makes you feel joyful, then how can I not be happy?"
"I'm sure my father doesn't like Andy," I told Seb in confidence.
"Oh, but of course your father doesn't like him," Seb teased. "No father is ever going to think the man his daughter is marrying is worthy of his daughter. That's fathers for you, isn't it?"
"Well, I suppose it is," I said rather lamely. Simone had been excited to hear my great news, and thought that Andy was a catch. "Oh, I'm so jealous of you, Patsy," she said. "I wish someone would sweep me off my feet like Andy did to you, and propose to me. I'm so tired of all these damn dating websites. I mean, I meet these men online, and they look all that, when I see their photographs, of course. But when I finally meet up with them, they're nothing like their picture. But that's not the deal breaker. Some of the men I meet, well, they're just so boring. And yet when I decide I'm never going to go online to date again, 2 days later I'm setting myself up on another date. I'm like a hamster that can't resist going around and around and around on the wheel again. And even when I'm not enjoying myself, I still put myself through this punishing ritual. What's wrong with me? The only guy I actually liked never called me back. It's such a bummer, it really is."
"Well, I suppose there's someone for everyone," said Seb teasingly. "One of these days Mr. Right will sweep you off your feet, Simone, I'm most sure."
"I hope you're right, Seb, because right now I feel like I'm going to give up on love for good." After Andy had absconded from our wedding on that fateful day, I had seen Andy's mother, Mrs. Glover, in town from time to time. But every time she saw me, she'd scurry away like a frightened mouse, and she'd look decidedly guilty, almost as if the weight of what her son had done to me weighed heavily on her conscience, and she was still basking in her own personal embarrassment and guilt about the matter, I suspect. I guess in her shoes, if my son had done that to his bride, I would feel rather guilty about things, as if in some way I was to blame for my son's inappropriate behaviour. I had rushed up to her to ask her if she'd heard from Andy, and her face had significantly paled, and she'd said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Patsy. Let's put this behind us, shall we? There's no point in dwelling on the past. A waste of time, if you ask me. I know my son hurt you, and I do apologise for that, Patsy. But let it go, won't you?" "But, Mrs. Glover, I can't do that, don't you see? I haven't spoken to Andy. I need to speak to him. Have you spoken to him, Mrs. Glover? Have you asked him why he called the wedding off? I need to know why he did this to me. It's so important. I can't make sense of any of this."
"Look, dear, I do apologise for what my son did to you on your wedding day. I can't imagine how awful that must have been for you. And I'm not pleased with his behaviour. But he's moved on with his life to another area. He's living a new life. And you would be wise to do the same. There's no point in dragging up all this dust, is there? Let it go, will you? You're a lovely young lady, Patsy dear, with a bright future ahead of you. Why not embrace it? And look forward. Don't look back."
I had told my mother about the brush-off I'd received from Mrs. Glover. "I was just asking her, Mum, if she knew why Andy ditched me at the altar. She just brushed it away as if it was a piece of hair stuck on her overcoat. She pretty much suggested I should move on with my life. I bet she's heard from Andy and knows exactly why he abandoned me on my wedding day. But she's refusing to tell me anything. I'm sure she knows exactly what happened."
"Look, love,"
said my father, looking up from his paper that morning, his eyes full of compassion.
"Just let it go, will you? Don't harp on something you cannot change. I'm quite sure Mrs. Glover is very embarrassed about what her son did to you. But you're better off without him. That's what I say."
"But you never liked Andy, did you, Dad?" I said accusingly.
Andy told me he was pretty sure you despised him. No, it's true, I didn't like Andy at all. In fact, I disliked him from the moment I laid eyes on him, said my father very suddenly. I remember when you invited him around to dinner to meet us that night. All he could do was go on and on about himself. He didn't bother to ask us any questions about ourselves, nor did he tell us how wonderful he thought you were. He didn't compliment your mother for anything when she'd busted a gut to lay out a magnificent spread for him, which was absolutely delicious, but I've heard no word of thanks from him at all. The worst part of it all was I noticed when he walked through our front door, he kicked Barker out of the way, and any man who kicks a dog, well, I have absolutely no respect for him. People who treat animals badly are narcissistic, as far as I'm concerned. There is no excuse for such behaviour. He kicked Barker? I asked. Are you sure, Dad? I didn't see him do that. You must be mistaken. Barker was our beloved black Labrador, a friendly, very effusively warm dog, who always rushes up to people to greet them at the front door. He welcomes everyone, and everybody loves him. He has the most magnificently beautiful nature. I would have been utterly appalled and devastated had I seen Andy kicking him out of the way with a boot. How had I not noticed this? My father would never make something up like this. No wonder he hadn't warmed to Andy on the night I brought him home for dinner. I was aware that Andy wasn't fond of animals, but I thought it was simply because he hadn't grown up with them. But to kick Barker like that, it was unacceptable. Of course, I'm sure, my father said. I don't trust people who treat animals badly. Not 1 inch. I thought there was something slippery about Andy. I've worked in the bank all my life, you know, Patsy. And if someone like Andy Glover came to get a loan out of me, I'd refuse him on instinct. I'd know he would be unlikely to pay it back. But that's biased of you, Dad. You couldn't do that. You better believe I could. In my job over the years, I've developed gut instincts on people. And the moment you introduced me to Andy, I knew he was no good. But, Dad, why didn't you tell me any of this? Why would you keep this from me? My father closed his paper, folding it up neatly and placing it beside his breakfast plate. He began to butter a piece of toast, covering it with some raspberry jam, and then he took a bite. Once he had finished chewing his first mouthful, he put down his piece of toast and said, "Since when have you listened to anything I've ever told you, Patsy? If I told you I didn't like Andy, you'd have probably liked him all the more. Remember the time I told you not to go out with that boy Russell a while back? Do you know what I did when I expressed my disapproval? I drove you straight into his arms. And what happened? Russell Davies broke your heart, as I absolutely knew he would. I could tell he had a wandering eye, and no girl deserves to be saddled with a guy like that, especially not my daughter." I knew my father spoke the truth, of course. I do remember the rebellious side of my character was easily tweaked when my father would take me to one side and tell me he didn't like someone. And when he told me that Russell was no good for me, I refused to listen to him. "He's no good for you, love. I don't trust him. The boy is no good. Anyone can see he's a ladies' man from a mile off." When my father had said that to me, the teenager inside me became unduly defensive. "Why, what's wrong with him, Dad?" I ranted. "I told you, love. Russell Davies cannot be trusted as far as you can throw him. He is going to cheat on you. That's guaranteed. I know the type all too well." "Dad, don't be ridiculous. He's not going to cheat on me." "It's not for you to tell me who I can and cannot go out with." My father sighed wearily and said, "Look, I'm only looking out for you, love, because I love you." "You're not looking out for me, Dad. You're interfering. You're putting your nose into my personal business, and I'd like you to butt out, please. Who I choose to date is none of your business." At the time, in my whimsical naivety, I had thought of my father as being completely unreasonable, until I caught Russell at a party getting very frisky with another girl. And when I confronted him about it, I was so angry, because I realized that Russell had cheated on me, and there was no coming back from this. You cannot unsee what you see. And then in that quintessential moment the scales had fallen away from my eyes, and it had not been pretty, let me tell you. I realized in that moment that my father had been absolutely right about Russell Davies.
Of course, after I discovered Russell had cheated on me, I had been a blubbering crybaby for weeks on end, I'm ashamed to say, feeling certain that I'd never be able to trust a boy ever again. I remember realizing that Russell Davies was the biggest douchebag on the entire planet. I pretended I didn't care, as if Russell's cheating had all been like water off a duck's back to me. But in reality he'd really broken my heart, like my father predicted he would. At the coffee shop, Seb eyed me with wide, earnest eyes.
"It's been 3 years, Patsy," he repeated. "I would have thought it was water under the bridge by now. You need to let this all go. I can't believe you're bringing this all up again. What Andy did to you 3 years ago is eating you alive. That's not healthy."
"Seb, you need to understand," I told him. "I'm still so incredibly haunted about what happened to me on my wedding day, even if it was 3 years ago. That doesn't matter. Sometimes I wake up in a sweat, my pyjamas are soaked through, and I keep having the same horrible, horrible nightmare. The nightmare is always the same. I'm standing there in front of the altar, in my wedding dress, in front of all those guests. We're about to say our vows to each other, and then Andy gets that strange text on his cell phone. He looks at me apologetically, says he's coming back, and then disappears into the sunset, and I never see him again, which is exactly what happened to me on my wedding day. It keeps playing over and over again in my mind, even when I'm fast asleep. I don't think these nightmares are ever going to go away, Seb, until I finally have answers. I've asked his mother, Mrs. Glover, why Andy abandoned me on my wedding day. I'm sure she knows exactly the reason why he did this, but she's not remotely forthcoming about anything. She won't tell me anything, but I know she knows. She told me to let it go and move on with my life, but I can't, and I won't do that."
"I'm sure you're right about that, Patsy," Seb admitted. "I'm sure Mrs. Glover must know why her son left you at the altar. She must have confronted him about it. No doubt asking him what the hell he thought he was doing on his wedding day, abandoning his fiancée like he did. It was a cruel thing to do any way you look at it. And I'm sure she knows exactly what happened, but I doubt you ever will. And you need to make peace with that, Patsy. I hate to say this, but Mrs. Glover is absolutely right. You need to release these festering troubles of yours for your own sense of well-being. Sometimes in life you have to accept that sometimes the answers will never be found. I know it's frustrating for us as humans. It's in our intrinsic natures to always want answers. Think about those true crime documentaries we often watch together. How often do you hear the police say that no answers will ever be found in a case, that they've reached an end in their investigations? Sometimes they're forced to close the case. Then there are cases we hear about on the news all the time. Years later we're none the wiser of what really happened, as everything is always shrouded in mystery, it will seem. Rather like the Madeleine McCann abduction, or the Jean-René Ramsey case. We may have our theories, of course, about what happened in those cases. But once again, the answers will never be fully known to us. It's like that for you. You'll never know what Andy was thinking when he suddenly ran away from the wedding ceremony like that. And I think it's going to drive you nuts if you keep harping on about this in your mind.
That's where you're wrong, Seb. I can find answers. I can. If only I can talk to Andy. I could speak to him and ask him why he did what he did. And I think when I confront him, he'll tell me the truth. I know he will. I deserve that much, don't I? I need answers, Seb. I really do. But if I ask Mrs. Glover where Andy is living, she won't tell me. And I have asked her that. She just keeps saying, let it go, let it go, let it go. She pretty much told me to leave him be. She's being so unduly protective towards him, and it's driving me hopping mad.
You really want to know where Andy is living? Seb asked me. You really believe you can get closure if you go and see him? Is that what you really want?
Yes, I do, Seb, but I don't know how the hell I'm going to find him. One thing I'm certain about, Mrs. Glover isn't going to tell me where he is. And ever since Andy did a runner from my life, there's no evidence of his whereabouts on social media. He used to be on Facebook, you know, and on WhatsApp. Not anymore. He has no internet presence whatsoever. I've contacted old friends of his who say they haven't heard a dicky bird from him since the wedding day. So he's even cut contact with his friends, if what they're telling me is true, of course. Seb let out a resigned sigh,
and then said, "There is a way you can find Andy, Patsy. But I'm still not certain you should open this can of worms. Sometimes it really is best to just let it go. And if you want my honest opinion, that's what I believe you should do in the circumstances. Think about it, Patsy. Even if you were to confront Andy in person, I don't know if it's going to make things any easier or any better for you."
"You know a way that I can find him, do you, Seb?" I asked, looking at him with wide, pleading eyes. "How can I find him?"
"Well, it's pretty straightforward, really," said Seb. "All we need to do is hire a private investigator. They have the ways and means to track down people. You know Mr. Lucas, my very good customer here at the flower shop, who's always buying flowers for his mother and wife religiously every week?"
"Yes, what about him?" I asked.
"Well, Mr. Lucas hired a private investigator called Mr. Froome, and he said this man was brilliant."
"Why did Mr. Lucas hire a private investigator?" I asked.
Seb made a face. "He was certain his wife was cheating on him. That's why."
"And was she?"
I asked. "No, she wasn't cheating on her husband, as it happens," which was very good news for Mr. Lucas. Although Mr. Froome did unearth his wife's secret, it turns out Mrs. Lucas's wife kept secretly meeting up with a mystery man. Mr. Froome provided photographic evidence of this. The man in the photographs he discovered was Mrs. Lucas's brother, who had been incarcerated for 10 years, in prison, I believe. The family never spoke of the matter, as they were very ashamed to have a son who went to prison. When people inquired about him, they claimed he'd moved to England. They refused to talk about the matter with anyone, and brushed it surreptitiously under the carpet, pretending their son didn't exist anymore. Mrs. Lucas never ever told her husband about her brother, or even about his existence, as her parents had told her not to ever talk about him again. Mrs. Lucas was extremely close to her brother, and wanted to reconnect with him again, so she did so in secret. The family wanted nothing to do with him, but Mrs. Lucas loved her brother, so they'd have these secret rendezvous in town, enjoying lunch together and so forth. And she was keeping these liaisons secret from her husband, and immediate family, of course. But Mr. Froome was able to untangle this secret for Mr. Lucas, like a knotted piece of knitting, and get to the nuts and bolts of what was really going on. He was very thorough in his investigation, and Mr. Lucas was able to get the answers he desperately needed.
"What did Mrs. Lucas's brother do that was so bad the family wanted to wipe their hands of him?"
"I believe he got into a drunken brawl one night at a bar, broke someone's jaw in a fist fight. I understand Mrs. Lucas's brother was very large, a muscular man. He worked out in the gym all the time, had huge biceps. The guy whose jaw he broke was lucky to escape with his life. I understand Mrs. Lucas's brother has no memory of what the fight was about. But I guess when you're drunk as a skunk, sometimes the littlest things can trigger you. Mrs. Lucas said that her brother was sometimes unaware of his own strength, and that the damage he could do, based on his size, of course. Mr. Froome provided all the evidence for Mr. Lucas, and told him, yes, his wife was seeing a man, but it wasn't a lover, it was her brother. As you can imagine, Mr. Lucas confronted his wife about everything, and she came clean to her husband about her brother. I understand from Mr. Lucas that his wife's brother is a reformed character these days, which is good news indeed. Although sadly Mrs. Lucas's rigidly stiff, uncompromising parents cruelly want nothing more to do with their son. I'm glad to say Mrs. Lucas and her husband are very much now involved in her brother's life. He lives with them in their house, I believe. Anyway, my point is, Patsy, this private detective, Mr. Froome, found all the nuts and bolts in this case for the Lucases, well, for Mr. Lucas, that is, who was able to realize that his wife had not been seeing another man but a brother, and she wasn't having an affair. And that's the kind of private detective you need to hire, Patsy, don't you think?
So he clearly knows what he's doing, that's for sure. This Mr. Froome, I mean.
Well, put it this way, Patsy. If you want someone to track down your ex-fiancé, Mr. Froome is the man for the job. I wouldn't doubt for a second his ability to deliver. If anyone can find the whereabouts of Andy Glover, it's going to be Mr. Froome. I can give Mr. Lucas a call if you like, and get Mr. Froome's number from him, and we can call Mr. Froome for ourselves to come and visit us here at the flower shop after hours. We can ask him to track down Andy for you. I want to help you, Patsy, find Andy. Because if it's going to make you feel that you can move on with your life, then we need to do this, and we must." I hugged Seb so tightly, and he kissed me on my forehead. "You're the best, Seb. What did I do to deserve such a loyal friend like you? You have no idea how much this means to me." Seb grinned cheekily. "I can't help myself as far as you're concerned, Patsy. I may be 15 years your senior, but I feel like a brother to you, and I know I always will." So there we are. That is the end of part 2 of our story. Part 3 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.